Good morning, everyone. Well, we're back from vacation, and you're all back with it. So we thank you for being here this morning. We have a big crowd. You know, election time coming, and so everybody wants to come and talk to you. After the election, I'm not so sure I want to talk to you, but we do the thing. And so we're going to start by saluting our flag, of course. Everybody please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Arnie? This is our guest, Arnie. Are you here, Arnie? He left. Too many guests. Oh, here he comes.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'd like to read off the names of all of our guests, and please hold your applause till I am done. Thank you. Ed Saul, Emily Schlossberg's office. Howie Zimmerman, Property Appraiser's office. Mike Pratt, Property Appraiser's office. Harry Roche, Lake Worth Drainage District. Dana Ackerman White, Commissioner Kerner's office. Lori Berman, State Senator. Maribel Reynoso Coleman, candidate for Circuit Judge. Lauren Weaver, okay, I can't read that. Gabriela Ferrero, Civil Engineering Liaison, Tax Collector's Office. Alcolia St. Just, candidate, Judicial. Alex Alaya, Vice President, Palm Beach County, Democrats. Scott Kerner, candidate for Judge. Abby Ross, aide to Senator Berman. Jessica Salona, Senator Rader's office. Tiffany David, Palm Beach County School District. Michael McAuliffe, candidate for Judge. Diana Johnson, Executive Administrator, Clerk and Controller's office. Ashley Zuckerman, candidate for the County District 4. Sean Hall, Regional Director, Bill Nelson's office. Jenny Caesar, Congressional Outreach for Congresswoman Lois Frankel's office. Sean Reed, Public Information Officer, Palm Beach County Water Utilities. Laura Corey, Regional Representative, South Florida Water Management District. Megan White, Commissioner Berger's office. Darren Omekis from Commissioner Bernard's office. Greg Roya, Director of not sure what office. Felix Abram, District Supervisor. Rosemary Raymond, Lake Worth Drainage District. Here we are. Chris Keene, Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. I think I got everybody. Welcome, everybody.
We'd like to spell you and say your name correctly, but if we sign in the future, please be a little more careful how you say it. Okay, I'm going to call on our officials. I'm going to call on Captain Sands. Captain Sands.
That's it?
You better be nice to him. He's our captain. He's being nice to us. Okay, here you are.
Good morning. Thank you very much. All right. Get a couple things out. Everybody okay?
Yep. Yeah. How about you?
I'm all right. Thank God. All right. I think I worked this mic situation out, though. All right. I'm glad everybody's here today. I'm happy to see you. Please make it a point to come down. Please make it a point to come down and see me at the district. We're looking pretty good. Crime's on its way down. Not only within the district, but within the region. There's a couple of things I want to share with you guys today. How about now? All right? Holy. All right. All right. We've had some stolen vehicles within West Del Rey. 52. I had the criminal analyst do a workup for me. And from January 1st through September, we've had 52 stolen vehicles.
Wow.
It's a lot, right? Try living in the city of Lake Worth. Try living in West Palm Beach. Believe it or not, I'm not downplaying this by no means, but relatively speaking, we're in good shape. Here's the wow factor. And I want you guys to really say wow when I say this, because I want you guys to feel this the way I see this. Is of the 52 cars stolen over the last 6 months, how many of you guys believe that we had 30 plus vehicles that had the keys left in the vehicle? Can I get a wow? Wow. All right? We're giving our vehicles away. We're giving our property away. Ladies and gentlemen, please, we can't make it this easy on these criminals. Now, with that said, I truly understand with all the years of experience I have, a criminal will find a way. You guys know that. But please, don't give them the vehicles away. Don't give your property away. Help us help you, please. All right? Now I got something else for you. I had the same analyst do another workup for me. And this one is for the total number of auto burglaries over West Delray Beach. Same time frame. 115 auto burglaries. Remember, keep it relative. Relatively speaking, West Delray Beach, the other areas of the county are experiencing a far greater number than that. Of the 115 vehicles that were broken into, 70%, which equates to 81, all the vehicles were unlocked.
Stupid.
They're unlocked.
Have you caught anybody?
We've caught many. Matter of fact, good question. Thank you for asking. We're working on a case right now that we're with 3 arrests pending. We're going to knock out at least 6 of the burglaries. Through three arrests. Six of them will be cleared. The problem is that you're leaving the vehicles, not you per se, but I need your help. I need your help getting out there. I need your help discussing this with your neighbors, with your HOAs, with board of directors. Everybody that'll listen, please help us. That we need you guys to lock these doors. Let me give you another staggering number. Of the 115, we have 30 of them, which equates to 60%, 18 of them, which equates to 60% of the remaining numbers, the vehicle's windows are smashed out. But also the analyst had described to me is this, definitively shows and demonstrates that during the nighttime, of the 86% with the vehicles left unlocked is happening in residential areas at night. So what that says to us is that the criminals are going through the neighborhoods wanting to remain quiet, so they're just checking all the car handles. They're checking all the car handles, and they're going into the cars and taking property. During the daytime, the number drops, but it drops to 18, and the windows are being smashed out. What that suggests is that the criminals are walking through the plazas, using the vehicles, the cars, people hustling and bustling, they're not paying attention, coming and going from shopping, and they're smashing the window, and they're taking your property. But again, we're leaving, of all the reports we reviewed, people are leaving their valuables in plain sight. People are leaving their valuables in plain sight. Please, do your very best. I get it. You're the kids, you're going here, you're rushing around, life happens. I get it. But please, before you get out of the car, take the valuables out of plain sight. Let that guy, that criminal move on to the next person or the next person. If you don't make if you don't create an opportunity for them, they'll move on. All right? So other than that, everything else is really is good. I don't want to alarm you with those numbers because I'm very happy with them. Now, with that being said, I'm not happy with any crime, but you have to realize that there's criminals out there that's going to take advantage of the opportunities. All right? So please don't. I'm going to be around for a while. Any questions, just come see me. I got Lieutenant Morris in the back. Sergeant Rashawn Newland's with us here as well to answer questions. And please don't hesitate to come on down to the district. Come on down to the district, sit with me. I'll go over all the stuff with you. I'll answer any questions you have. I'll put your mind to rest. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Tony Keelis from Fire Rescue. Tony. Tony joins us every month. He brings us news on fire rescue. Come on, Tony.
Just want to thank Bob, Dr. Lori, and the Alliance again for giving us some time to speak today. Really quick show of hands, and be honest, who in here has a heating blanket? Raise your hand. No chance. Okay, I'm only bringing it up because I know we talk a lot about the programs we run, whether it's CPR, AED, stuff like that, Yellow Dot, and we don't really talk too much or touch on, and it's probably my fault, fire safety. So Saturday, had a big fire out in West Boca that was started by a heating blanket that was left plugged in. So just do yourselves a favor and please police your own area and talk to your friends. If you know someone who has that extension cord behind the TV that has 30 things plugged into it, and it's from 1976, we need to go get a newer one with a surge protector and not overdo the electrical part of your house. So that's what's starting some fires here, and I know we have the winter coming up, and most of our population in BAT 4 and BAT 5, which is where I serve, likes to be warm and tidy in their houses. So if you could just help take care of that, I would really appreciate it. Hurricane prep was good for most of the neighborhoods that we've been in and around talking to. Everybody seems to be ready and prepared, so we appreciate that because it helps us do our job in the event of an emergency. So that's it. All right, thank you, be safe, and have a good day.
Senator Berman, are you here, Senator Berman? We're honored to have Senator Berman here today. Used to be Representative Berman. She got tired of that, and so she became a senator. I don't know why.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so glad to be with all of you as we start the new year, this new school year, the Jewish New Year, so we've got a lot of things going on in our community. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the amendments. You're going to be hearing about them. Todd Von Laren is going to do an excellent job of presenting all the amendments to you. But Todd has to stay neutral in his job when he presents the amendments, and I'm not neutral on a couple of the amendments, and I just want you to know where I am and why I am. The two amendments that I'm the most passionate about are Amendments 2 and Amendment 4. Amendment 2, what it does, Todd will go into a lot more detail, but it continues a homestead exemption, a non-homesteaded property exemption that we have, and doesn't allow it to sunset, and that is that any non-homesteaded property, the most your taxes can be raised is 10%, which is a pretty significant number. And there are many non-homesteaded properties. If you have a rental property, commercial properties, there's something like 100,000 properties alone in Palm Beach County. So I think it's really important. It's a very understated amendment that people don't understand, but I'm asking you to vote yes on Amendment 2. And the other one is Amendment 4, which is the restoration of rights for felons, which most of you, I'm sure, have probably heard about. And before I go, the other thing I want to just remind you about, and you'll be hearing a lot more about it, is the school board increases for millage. And as a member of the Florida legislature, I can tell you that we have done a very poor job of funding our schools, and so I support this amendment, this initiative, because I think it's important to adequately fund our public schools. So thank you so much for that. I don't think it has a number, right? Does it have a number? It's not a number, and it's going to be the very bottom amendment. It's going to be the last amendment on your ballot. So number 4. 4 yes, 2 yes, 4 yes, and then the school board. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Please remember to tell everyone to vote in November. We all know elections are important and elections have consequences. So thank you all. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I appreciate your being here and spreading the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Good news. Let's see. Sarah is involved in healthcare, and it's coming to that time of year that they'll be advertising. You see it on the papers. They're advertising for people to sign up for the various programs, and she has a little information she'd like to give you. Sarah.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As you probably know, the annual enrollment period is about to begin, and that is October 15 to December 7. This is a time where you could switch your Medicare Part D plan. Good idea to take a look at it. And by the way, I want to thank Congresswoman Lois Frankel for all her help with Medicare and Social Security. Jenny is here from her office if you have any questions. So back to the annual enrollment period, October 15 to December 7, you can switch from one Medicare Advantage plan to another Medicare Advantage plan. If you have a Medicare supplement plan and you're happy, you don't need to do anything. But if you want to switch from a supplement to a Medicare Advantage plan or vice versa, now is the time to do it, and your changes will become effective January 1 of 2019. Here's something new that is starting the first quarter of 2019, and that is called the open enrollment period. If you make a change and you're not happy within the first quarter, you can make one final change. Or let's say your doctor drops the plan and this change happened recently, you can make that change during the open enrollment period, January 1 to March 31st, and this is new for 2019. So one more change, and it's a good one. And I'm here if you have any questions, but I do direct you to speak with your agent, your insurance agent, for any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that information, Sarah. It's important that we know. It gets to be hectic this time of the year. People have to make decisions. Sometimes they get caught up and undecided what to do. So let's see. Well, we're up to our sponsor. Sponsor today is Allegro. You all heard of them. They're advertising heavily. They're resident homes, and Ina is going to give you a little information. And we want to thank her for sponsoring our breakfast today. Come on, Ina.
Good morning, everybody. We're happy to sponsor the breakfast. I hope you enjoyed it. And for those of you that don't know what Allegro is inspired senior living. We offer independent living, assisted living, and memory care services for those with dementia or Alzheimer's. We are right on the border of Boynton Beach and Delray Beach, and we would love to have you come and see us. One of the things that I just want to share with you is I have some partners here with me today that work with me in the building. I have Michael Mole with Senior Helpers. I have Jane Garcia-Deal with Trilogy. And what we like to do is go out to the 55+ communities and educate you. We don't sell you. We want to help you as you age, to age as well as you can in place, and provide answers to important questions. So if anybody would like to have us come and speak with them, we would love to do so. And if anybody would like to come and tour my beautiful community, I would love to have you come visit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ina. I told her she had a short time. She took me literally, very short time. We sponsored a breakfast. And now, we're going to get to Dr. Lori Minnick, who's going to introduce our primary speaker, and pay attention, those amendments are killers. We're all going to make mistakes if we don't know what we're doing. We'll live to regret it, too.
Okay, great. Thank you, President Bob. Yes, good morning, everybody. Just a few reminders about our HOA, COA course for board certification. It's November 8th, and I'm signing up people, and you can, every one of our communities can join in. It's going to be right here at the Civic Center. Just the seating is limited, so please text or email me. The information is all in the newsletter and on the emails when we get sent them out. One follow-up to our Solid Waste Authority issue that we described last month, that we had a very good result from the commissioners on that, but our communities are being called by the Solid Waste Authority now, from what we hear from our community leaders, that they're calling up and asking, what type of trash container does your community want? What size? And it appears to the people that they have to choose one size. And we were told that people will be able to have a smaller one if they want it, residents. So we're going to straighten that question out this afternoon They are having a meeting up by Beeline Highway up there, and we're going to question that to see if people can individually, if they want a smaller trash can, they can get it. Because that's nebulous when they're calling up and finding out that information on the phone, okay? And we're going to have the January meeting all about keeping Palm Beach County safe and clean. So we'll be hearing from the Solid Waste Authority at that time. Today, Todd Bunlaren, in between his busy schedule of meetings today, he made the time to come here. He's been traveling all over the county explaining these amendments. He is the Assistant County Administrator. He joined the county in 1999 as Executive Director of the Legislative Delegation, and more recently served as Director of Legislative Affairs, and he developed the legislative program for the County Commission and coordinating the county's lobbying efforts in Tallahassee. Now he's been given the position of Assistant County Administrator. He knows all about these amendments, and you have cards there. Please fill them out if you have any questions, and he is now going to speak. Todd Bunlaren. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. How's the Delray Alliance doing today? I appreciate you all being informed voters, and you certainly will be by the end of the next 25-30 minutes. Just want to warn you, I usually do these presentations in about an hour and 25 minutes. That's how extensive the ballot is this year, but we're going to kind of cruise by it a little bit more quickly. Just very quickly so you know, the ballots on the amendment this year, there's 12 statewide amendments, there's 1 county question, but the statewide amendments were put there by either the legislature, by voter initiative, or the Constitutional Revision Commission. And the CRC amendments start at number 6 and go all the way down. It happens once every 20 years. They get together, have the opportunity to put something directly on the ballot. In order for any of these questions to pass, 1 through 13, they must pass by at least 60% plus 1 vote in order to be amended into the Constitution. So normally I read each of these. We won't have enough time to do that today, but I did pass out to you this white 2-page stapled piece that has the amendments written, so if you have it, take that out. If not, they're located here on the desk where the League of Women Voters are. And then also a 1-pager that we put together on Amendment 1, just to give you a little bit more information about that particular one. So let's jump right into Amendment number 1, increased homestead property tax exemption. So basically, a lot of you are thinking, I already have a homestead exemption on my house. Some of you might have 2 homestead exemptions on your house, and many of you do. What this amendment is asking you is, do you want to have a third $25,000 homestead exemption? So today, the first $25,000 of your property's assessed value is exempt. The next $25,000 is taxed. The next $25,000 after that's exempt. Under this proposal, the next $25,000 would be exempt, and then the value between $100,000 and $125,000 would be tax exempt if this were to pass. So the first question I'd ask you, does it even apply to you? For most homestead property owners around the state of Florida, it doesn't. So on this 1-pager that I gave you, there's a website you can go to. You can put in your address and see if it even applies to who you are, to where you live. The second and third things that you just need to take into consideration are this. Those who vote for it are probably people that want to have some additional dollars in their pocket if they qualify for this. And that's what it will yield. It will yield additional funding back to you as a taxpayer. On the other side of this issue, the issue is about delivery of services and how the Board of County Commissioners and cities around this county allocate those funds. So if it does pass, for Palm Beach County, the effect would be about a reduction of $37 million in the general fund, fire rescue, and the library fund. And so somehow, funds from those different areas are going to have to either be cut, or the Board of County Commissioners or City Commissions will have to increase millage to make up for that difference. So just keep those things in mind as you go into the polling place. So vote yes on Amendment number 1, adds an additional $25,000 homestead exemption. A vote no is a vote to not increase the homestead exemption by additional $25,000, but it will not affect the other homestead exemptions that you currently have. Amendment number 2 deals with limitations on property tax assessments. You heard Senator Berman earlier talk about this particular initiative. So back in 2008, you as the voters voted to put into the Constitution a cap on the amount of valuation that a non-homesteaded property can rise in order to be taxed. And that cap was 10%. How did that come about? Well, a lot like what we're seeing today with this rise in real estate values. Back in the early 2000s, we saw that. A lot of property owners said this isn't fair because some of their properties were going up 20, 30, 40% in a single year, and likewise their tax bills were going up. So the legislature put this on the ballot. They put a sunset provision on this, which would mean that this would go away January 1st of 2019. What this question is asking you is, would you like to just take that sunset away and keep it in the Constitution essentially in perpetuity? So a vote for Amendment number 2 means that you want to take the sunset provision out of the Constitution on the 10% cap and keep that 10% cap going forward in perpetuity until otherwise amended. A vote no on this means no, you want to see this provision sunset and go away. So what does it mean? Well, for people who are homestead property owners, a lot of folks who are homesteaded property owners say, wait, you know, I want to see other people and other properties pay more. Businesses, non-homesteaded property owners, some of them are receiving income of their properties, so sometimes homesteaded property owners say, you know, they should pick up a higher burden of this. On the other side of this issue, if this does go away and property values and taxes increase for those non-homesteaded properties, there's probably a strong chance that they might pass those down to either the consumer as a business or a renter who might be renting a non-homesteaded property. So just keep those two issues in mind when you're deciding on Amendment number 2. Amendment number 3 deals with an issue of voter control of gambling in Florida. Now, the first 2 amendments were put on the ballot by the Florida legislature. This was put on the ballot by a citizen-led petition initiative. And if you see, there's a second paragraph on here on these, and it talks about a financial impact statement. That financial impact statement has to be on there by law for initiatives that are put on the ballot by voters. If you read it, it won't give you a whole lot of information about what the financial impact of this is going to be, but it has to be there nonetheless. So what does this mean? Well, currently in the state of Florida, there's a couple of different ways that you can change law or change the status of gambling in the state of Florida. The Florida legislature has the ability to do that by passing bills just like they do other bills. And you, the voters, have the opportunity to do that as well. What this amendment is asking you is, do you want to take away that right of the legislature to change law in order to control gambling in the state of Florida and vest that solely in the hands of voters, so that any issue regarding gambling would have to come back to you, the voters of the state of Florida, in a particular initiative? Who's behind this particular issue? Well, you know, on the one hand, you've got about $27 million that's been raised by Walt Disney World and the Seminole Tribe of Florida, who both are in opposition of this particular initiative. Why would they be in opposition? Well, you know, Disney doesn't maybe want casinos to compete with their business potentially. The Seminole Tribe of Florida has an expansive gaming operation. Perhaps they don't want additional competition. And maybe it's a little more difficult to amend the Constitution than it is to maybe pass something through the legislature, although some people would argue it's much more difficult to get something through the legislature sometime on gaming than it is the Constitution. So a vote yes on Amendment number 3 means that you want to have the sole exclusive right to control gambling in the hands of the voters of the state of Florida. So issues would have to come back to the ballot and be voted by a 60% vote in order to be changed. A vote no means no, you'd like to keep the status quo that is today, where the legislature has the authority to make those decisions, as well as the voters to make some of those decisions. And that's Amendment number 3. Amendment number 4 deals with voting restoration amendment. You heard earlier about this as well. This was one that's put on the ballot by a citizen petition initiative. And essentially what this is asking you are, do you want felons in the state of Florida, exclusive of felons who have committed crimes dealing with murder or sex crimes, would you like them, after they have completed their entire sentence, so gone to prison, come out on parole, on probation, paid restitutions and fines, after all that's done, do you want them to automatically have their voting rights restored?
Yes.
This issue would affect over 1 million, potential 1 million residents of the state of Florida. It's one that, it's really a bipartisan issue that I've seen out there. I've seen some of the most conservative Republicans and some of the most liberal Democrats talking about advancing this particular issue. Just some history real quick. In the state of Florida, Florida's one of only 4 states that has probably one of the most difficult restoration of voting rights for felons. It's very arbitrary. It's left up to the governor. In the past 6.5 years under Governor Scott, maybe about 2,500 people have had their voting rights restored. In the 4 years and the governor before that under Charlie Crist, about 135 to 140,000 saw their rights restored. And a lot of that was really just based on decisions by the administration, making it a little bit more difficult versus making it a little bit easier to restore those voting rights. So a vote on amendment number 4 is if an individual who's committed a felony has completed all of the terms of the sentencing for the crime they committed, would you like them to have the ability to automatically have their voting rights restored, minus those who have been convicted of murder and sexual crimes that would have to go through a more extensive process? Or a vote no on this means that you would potentially leave it up to a more arbitrary process that's put in place depending on who the administration is at any given time in Tallahassee. And that's amendment number 4. Amendment number 5 was also put on the ballot by the Florida legislature, and this deals with a supermajority vote required to impose, authorize, or raise state taxes or fees. So this is the legislature coming back to you saying, hey, do you want to make it more difficult for us to raise your taxes? If so, vote yes on this. So what does that mean? Well, in the state of Florida today, in order to raise a fee or a tax, it must pass by 50% of both the chambers of the House and the Senate. Under this proposal, it would increase that threshold, and those would have to pass by at least 2/3 vote. So 27 of the 40 senators, 80 of the 120 members of the House of Representatives would have to vote affirmatively, and that fee or tax would have to be contained as a single subject in a standalone bill. So it couldn't be put in a big train and move through the process with a bunch of other things to be voted on. Why was the legislature want you to make it more difficult for them to raise their taxes? Well, right now in the legislature there's a very conservative leadership faction that controls the Florida legislature, and quite frankly they want to make it as difficult as possible to be able to raise taxes. And so if you're a very conservative person and you want to make it tough to raise taxes at the state level, then you might want to vote yes on this particular initiative. However, on the other hand, there's a faction of the legislature that feels very strongly about some of the needs of the state of Florida and wants a little bit more flexibility in being able to raise revenues. And if this were to pass, basically, even if the majority of the legislature believed that we need to increase taxes because of some kind of natural disaster or some super priority that they have, a small minority of the legislature, 1/3 of the legislature, could control that decision by saying no and blocking that from happening. So it's just 2 different ways of looking at an issue. A vote yes on Amendment 5 means that you want to require the Florida legislature to have a supermajority vote in order to pass a fee or a tax. A vote no means you like to keep the status quo of majority only, except in cases of corporate income taxes, which require a 3/5 vote of both chambers in order to be passed into law. And that's Amendment number 5. Now these are the easy ones. Now let's get into the complicated constitutional amendments. Let's start with Amendment number 6, which is the first one that the Constitution Revision Commission put on the ballot. And this 39-member or so panel, who's appointed by the governor, the president of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Supreme Court justices, the Attorney General, come together every 20 years and make these decisions. And you're going to see that these are very complicated because in many of these they put more than one subject in there. Sometimes up to 4 different subject matters in a single question. Why did they do it? Well, that's just the way it is. They were given about 21 or so amendments in the drafting committee, and as opposed to putting 21 additional amendments on the ballot, they thought, well, let's try to bundle some together that might work together or might not, and leave it to the voters to make an up or down vote on those. It's very complicated, but that's the question, and that's the issue that you're going to have to, work on, whether or not, the good or bad outweigh one or another and where you want to go. So Amendment number 6 deals with rights of crime victims and judges, which is what the title says. However, this actually deals with 3 different issues. So the first issue deals with rights for victims. Across America, there's been a movement called Marsy's Law, and constitutions around the country include victims' rights in there. And the history behind this is that There was an individual that went to prison for assaulting a woman. That individual went to jail, was released subsequently without the victim or their family knowing about the conditions of that release. And that individual who was released went on to kill Marcy in a very horrific crime. And it drew some attention to an issue that perpetrators or those accused have a lot of rights that they're afforded, but victims have not had a lot of rights. In Florida law right now, we have provisions in statute for the provisions of Marcy's law that you're voting on here. However, this, if voted into law, it would place it in the Constitution, which would make it much more difficult to change or alter those kinds of rights. So that's the first component of this particular initiative. The second piece of this is in Florida today, judges must retire when they turn 70 years old. This is asking you if you'd like to increase that retirement age from 70 to 75. Now, I know there's nobody in here today who's over 70 years old. But there are some people that feel, and there are some judges that feel that 70 is like the new 50, maybe, new 40. So, you know, people feel like judges are very capable and have the ability to make very good decisions at the age of 70 and above. Other folks think that some judges probably should have retired when they were 50 years old. So it really depends on where you are on that particular issue, but a vote for this would also extend the age of judges from 70 to 75 before mandatory retirement. And the third part of this is a complicated issue that deals with a legal issue known as the Chevron case. And the Chevron case basically says that when an agency, so I'll use an example of the Department of Environmental Protection, makes a determination on a rule or a law that they govern, that if somebody challenges that in a court of law, that the preponderance of that evidence would be on the defendant to have to make that decision of. And a judge, by case law, defers to the interpretation of the agency in giving deference on that case. So defendant attorneys for a long time have said, well, that's unfair. We want to be on a more equal level playing field, and we want to get rid of that judicial deference to those agency interpretations. And so a vote for this also would say that judges could not defer to agency interpretations of rules that they promulgate when making determinations in a court of law. So a vote yes means those three provisions I just explained will become part of the Constitution. A vote no means they won't. However, something like Marcy's law, for example, is still a part of statute and still would be something that would be implemented in the state of Florida and is currently in place on victims' rights. So that's amendment number 6. If you thought that was crazy. Let's talk about amendment number 7. So amendment 7 deals with first responder and military member survivor benefits and public colleges and universities. It actually has a number of different components to it. This also has 3 components to it as well. And let's break this down for you. So in terms of first responders and military member survivor benefits, again, just as I explained in Marcy law, in statute today, there are benefits that are provided for survivors and spouses and dependents of military and first responders killed in the line of duty. But what this is asking you is, would you like to put in the Constitution those provisions, whether it's payouts, whether it's paying for education for those individuals, to safeguard some of those benefits that are provided for those survivors of those who are killed in the line of duty. That's the first piece of this. The second piece, much like the tax issue we talked about earlier, would instead of a majority members of boards of universities, so at Florida Atlantic University there's a 13-member board. On the statewide board of governance over this university system, there's 17 members. They can vote by majority right now to increase fees that they charge. And those fees can be anything at the local level, from security fees to transportation fees to activity fees. At the state level, it deals with tuition. Today, that by a majority vote, they can make that determination. A vote yes on this would mean that a supermajority vote, so 9 members of 13 on the local board and 12 members of 17 on the state board, would have to vote affirmatively in order to increase fees and taxes. There's been a movement in the state of Florida over the last years to make it more difficult to raise fees and taxes no matter what they are, and that's what this provision is about. And finally, the third provision of this is it wants to codify the college system of governance in the Constitution. So the K through 12 system is in the Constitution of the state of Florida. The university system is, but the state college system is not. And why would people want to put that in there? Well, recently in past years, there's been an attack on the college system, and some people who feel very strongly on both sides, and this particular initiative felt strongly about preserving the college system as it is today that provides workforce and many other types of training. And so they're asking you to codify that in the Constitution to safeguard that structure of the current college system. So a vote yes means that you want to safeguard the college system structure, increase to a supermajority vote to raise fees for students of universities, and you want to codify first responder and military survivor benefits. A vote no means that those issues just don't go in the Constitution of the state of Florida. Okay? And that's amendment number 7. Amendment number 8, I'm going to give you a breather on amendment number 8. We're not going to talk about it because the Supreme Court of Florida kicked it off the ballot. They said it was misleading. This was dealing with charter schools, and it doesn't mention charter schools. I guess they felt that everything else wasn't misleading on here, so you're going to vote on those. But this was the one that they found to be misleading in the language that's in there. So we're going to skip over Amendment 8 and go to Amendment number 9. And Amendment number 9 does two things. Prohibits offshore oil and gas drilling, and prohibits vaping in enclosed indoor workplaces. Does everybody know what vaping is in here? Okay, good. Those are those electronic cigarettes where the gas just flows up into the sky somewhere. So this prohibition, if it were put into place, would 1, prohibit drilling in the Florida waters around the state of Florida, so that's 3 miles out on the Atlantic side, 9 miles out on the Gulf of Mexico. It wouldn't affect the federal waters, and there's a lot of conversation going around about federal waters between Florida and the Department of Interior, but that wouldn't be affected by this, just prohibition in state waters. And then it would also prohibit vaping in indoor public places, just like tobacco is prohibited. You can still use it in your home, you can still do it in standalone bars that don't serve food, but in all other places where tobacco is banned, vaping would be banned. So on this issue, oil and gas industry is opposed to this particular initiative. On the other side of it, many of your environmental groups are very much in support of Amendment number 9. So a vote for Amendment number 9 prohibits offshore oil and gas drilling in Florida waters and prohibits vaping in enclosed indoor workplaces. A vote no does not provide those prohibitions in the Constitution of the state of Florida. And that's Amendment number 9. Amendment number 10 deals with state and local government structure and operation. And this one has 4 different issues that are in it. So I'm going to talk briefly about each of those 4. First off, this particular provision would require, rather than authorize, that the legislature provide for a State Department of Veterans Affairs. Today, we currently have a State Department of Veterans Affairs. The Constitution was amended to authorize that to happen. What this is asking you, though, is instead of merely authorizing that, meaning leave it up to the discretion of the state of Florida whether to have it, you would change that word from authorize to require. So moving forward, Florida would always have to have a Department of Veterans Affairs, and it wouldn't be discretionary if the legislature one day decided we don't need a Department of Legislative Affairs or of Veterans Affairs anymore. That's the first piece. The second piece is it deals with creating a statewide Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism. So we sort of have one of those in the state of Florida already, in the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, but just the history on this piece, it was part of a very controversial issue that was moving forward in the Constitutional Revision Commission. The controversial part of it was sort of taken out, but this sort of somewhat feel-good piece, I would say, was kept in there on the creation of the Domestic Security and Counterterrorism, and it just stuck around, and they decided to keep it in that particular amendment when the drafting committee took that issue up. That's the second issue that's in this. The third issue is asking you whether or not you want to require the legislature to convene a regular session on the second Tuesday of January in even-numbered years. Well, they currently have the ability to do that, and quite frankly, they've been doing it the last 6 years in practice, but they have flexibility on whether they want it to start in March or in January of even-numbered years. The Revision Commission is asking you, do you want to just make this and put this in perpetuity this way? Why do members want it this way? Well, some members of the legislature want to get home earlier for spring break to spend time with their kids. A lot of them just want to probably get out of Tallahassee as fast as they can. And then others want to get home and start working on their re-election campaigns and being able to raise money again. So, that's one of the few of the reasons why that particular provision is in there. And then finally, there's a provision in here that would prohibit counties from abolishing certain local elected offices like the sheriff, tax collector, property appraiser, supervisor elections, and clerk of courts. So what's happened in some counties around the state and charter counties, instead of those being elected positions, they've created appointed positions out of them. Why would they do that? In some cases, from a budgetary perspective, it's more accountable to that board who has to determine what those budgets are going to be, because right now that's who provides the budgets for the sheriff and supervisor elections and others. So that's why you've seen it in some areas. But what this is asking you is, do you want to take that ability away from voters and charters to change that in these charter counties, to take away those as elected positions and have them become appointed positions? In Palm Beach County today, they're all elected officials, and there's been no movement to try to change that, but that's the question that they're asking on this one. So 4 different provisions for Amendment number 10. To vote yes means you want to require Department of Veterans Affairs, create an Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism, require the legislature to convene in January of even-numbered years, and make sure that you always have elected constitutional officers instead of any being appointed. Okay? That's Amendment number 10. Amendment number 11, property rights, removal of obsolete provision in criminal statutes. So in the state of Florida, we have a provision in our Constitution, this has come before the voters before, that deals with the Florida Alien Land Law. And back in California at the turn of the century, when we saw a lot of Asian immigrants coming into America, there was some language that was proposed in the Constitution and subsequently in other state constitutions that would prohibit certain aliens from being able to own land in these individual states. Most of those states have repealed those provisions. In Florida, by statute, they have language that says you can't do that in the state of Florida. But this language, which a lot of people feel is very discriminatory, has remained in the Constitution, and the CRC is asking you again if you want to repeal that provision or keep that provision in the Constitution of the state of Florida. The second part of this repeals an obsolete provision, which is high-speed rail. So many of you voted a couple of times, one, to put high-speed rail in the Constitution to have it, then to repeal it. But when you repealed it, all you did was merely cross the language out in the Constitution. You didn't really take it out altogether. So it's just stricken through. This would just remove that stricken through language altogether. It wouldn't have any policy implications. It's just more of a style and scrivener issue that they're trying to clean up and take that obsolete provision out of that particular part of the Constitution. And then the third part of this issue deals with a provision of criminal statute that's referred to as the Savings Clause. And the best way for me to explain this to you is that when somebody goes and commits a crime and they are put in jail, and let's say they commit a crime and they get 30 years for that crime, if sometime later on the statute is changed in terms of the amount of time that they would provide for somebody who commits that crime to stay in jail, so change the provision from 30 years to 15 years for possession of marijuana. This, if passed, would allow for the judiciary to go back and relook at those terms of those sentences and make some of those changes to potentially release some folks earlier from our prison for committing crimes of which the sentences have been reduced on a statewide level. And that's kind of the easiest way to explain that provision, although there's a couple more very complicated parts of that as well. So a vote yes on Amendment number 11 would remove the Florida Alien Land Law from the Constitution, remove the obsolete language regarding the removal of high-speed rail from the state constitution, and it would also take the Savings Clause and allow for sentencing to be changed if the Florida legislature makes those changes in those provisions. And that's Amendment number 11. Amendment number 12, we're getting close to the end. Lobbying and abuse of office by public officers. So in many jurisdictions right now today, public officials have restrictions on what they can do in terms of lobbying, both while they're in office for compensation and also immediately when they get out of office. What this would do if it were passed is it would prohibit a sitting elected official from being compensated to lobby another body, elected body, and use their position to gain some disproportionate benefit. In addition, it would provide prohibitions for 6 years after that individual leaves office. So if somebody leaves the Florida Senate and they want to go back and get paid to lobby the Senate on issues, they couldn't do that for at least 6 years after they left office. And this would apply to the governor on down to judges and city commissioners and county commissioners. So a vote yes means that you would like to make it more restrictive for those in elected office to be able to be compensated to lobby bodies both while they're in office and immediately after their term for 6 years. A vote no means no, you rely on the individual restrictions that are placed on those various offices today, and those restrictions vary from 1 to 2 to 4 years depending on the different bodies. And the last statewide amendment that's going to be on the Constitution is Amendment 13 that ends dog racing. And basically what this would do, if passed, would phase out commercial dog racing in connection with wagering by 2020. So in the state of Florida today we have about a dozen or so pari-mutuel wagering dog tracks that exist. We have one here in Palm Beach County, the Palm Beach County Kennel Club. Just so you know, that employs about 500 some odd people, has about an $18 million revenue impact to the community. So the Kennel Club, I think, is very much opposed to this particular initiative just because they feel that there's an economic benefit both to jobs and people in the community. On the other hand, animal rights activists feel very strongly about this and don't feel like we should be racing dogs. This only deals with dogs, not with horses or other animals, so just dogs. But a vote yes on Amendment 13 would end dog racing as we know it in the state of Florida, and a vote no means that you would allow for dog racing to continue in the state of Florida. Now, we're going to have one other county-wide question that's going to be on the ballot, and you heard some reference to it before, but I brought some help from my friends here, two of our school board members, Karen Brill and Erica Whitfield, who are briefly going to talk to you about county question number 1, and then I'll wrap it up.
So thank you. I'm going to be turning the microphone over to my colleague. I'm Karen Brill. All of you know me. I speak here most of your monthly meetings. I'm the school board member for District 3. But now you're going to get a reprieve from me. You're going to hear from Erica Whitfield, who is our District 4 school board member. I will thank Todd for saving the best for last, because the county question is all the way down at the end of your ballot, at the bottom of the 4th page. So I'm going to turn the microphone over now to Ms. Whitfield, who's going to fill you in about it, and then if you have any questions, we will be here. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Erica Whitfield. I am the one who represents the super far east side of Delray, so that I'm really excited to be here with you all this morning. How many people are exhausted by all the things that Todd just talked about? Oh my gosh, there's so much. This is a very important question. How many of you all are signed up to vote by mail? Okay, I think everyone's hand should be in the air, and here's why. Because this is a really hard election. There's so much to read and a lot of pressure on you in the booth. I vote by mail. What I like about it is I get to sit at home with my little League of Women Voters handout, and I can go through and actually make sure that I truly understand each of the questions and know what you're voting for, because a lot of these things are written in a very confusing way. So I really want to encourage you to consider that as an option for this election and every election after. I think it's so important. This election, as you know, is November 6th. It is crucial for your schools, and that's why we wanted to come by and really talk to you. Both Ms. Brill and I have been going out to the community and talking about this. This is, we've kind of a short turnaround on asking you guys this question, so I want to make sure that we're here to answer any questions for you. If there's anything that you're concerned about, we want to really make sure that you understand. So, a couple of things that are really important about this question. First, a lot of people say, well, didn't we just give you a bunch of money? Yes, you did. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was the sales tax from 2 years ago. That was specifically for the buildings. That was all about capital improvements. So the roof, the floors, the windows, the air conditioning that was always breaking and sometimes still is, and we're replacing them. All that money for the next 10 years is going to go into that. We have an oversight committee that's watching how we spend that money. They are doing a very good job. They are made up of representatives from the community, and those people are watching how we spend it. We can't spend it on anything except for what we promised we would spend it on, which again is capital improvements. One of the things that happened this past year after the tragedy on February 14th is we had to start thinking a lot about security and how we were going to deal with that as a school board. The thing that we ended up really coming to as a decision was that we needed a police officer in every school. It makes me as a mom feel good knowing that I have that officer who, at my daughter's school, just makes me happy every day when I see him there. We drive up, we drop her off, and there he is really watching over the kids. He's engaged with those students. He's spending time with them. He's having that moment to really get them to understand police and to make sure our kids are okay. We have one in every school right now. It's a very expensive thing for us to do. We got some money from the state. It wasn't enough. So one of the things that this referendum, the very last thing, it's going to be asking for an extra mill on your property tax. And that mill would be split into three parts. The first quarter is safety and security, which includes mental health resources. We're trying to put a mental health person through partnerships in the community in every school so we can tackle security issues from within with our kids, deal with them before they become a big issue, and then also be able to tackle the issue of having a police officer in every school, which we feel is so important. So that's the first quarter. The second quarter is something you guys have been paying for about 8 years now. That's the money that we have asked you for with the arts, PE, music, choice programs, all those things you've already been doing. 650 positions, we're asking you to continue to fund that. So that's the second quarter. And then the whole last half, which makes up about $100 million a year, is to help our teachers and to give them an additional supplement in their pay. One of the reasons that we have to do that is we're one of the worst funded states when it comes to education in the country. Right now we are 44th out of 50 in this country. The state is not making up this money with the money that they give us. We've kind of had to come to terms with that as a school board, and we've realized that if we can't pick up the money through the state's property taxes, and they keep reducing the millage when they get their opportunity to cut taxes, which we all appreciate, but I think what we're having to ask the voters now is, can Palm Beach County come in and support us for our schools here locally? So that money, if you are so kind to give us this additional funding through this property tax, would actually stay here locally, improve our economy here locally, and give a supplement to our teachers. $1,000 for every person who's been here for 1 year, $5,000 for anybody who's been here for 5 years, and then $10,000 additional every year for a teacher who's been here for 10 years and more. The reason this is so important is because teachers usually stay with us about 3 years, and then they don't see that there's any future for them in education, there's going to be no more money in the future, and then they leave. And then they go find a different job, or they decide they want to just do something completely different. It's really difficult for us to retain teachers. It's even more difficult to recruit teachers. We have to recruit about 1,000 a year for every time the teachers leave us. So it's very, very difficult. So this whole thing, you want to know how much it's going to cost you? This is really important to me, so let me tell you how I break this down. And actually, Ms. Brill was the one who told me this. I think it's brilliant. If you go to the property appraiser's website, you can go look down at your specific house, and you go all the way to the bottom, and there's a space where it says assessed and taxable value. That's not how much your house you paid for it. That's not how much it's worth right now. That's how much you're going to actually be taxed on. For me, I bought my house at about $225. It's gone up a little bit. It's about average for the county. Right now, I would have to pay about $154 extra a year for this. And to me, there's no better place to send that money. And you have actually seen a savings from the state over the last few years, which should be about what we're asking you for. So this money actually just brings us back to where we were just a few years ago. Okay, so I covered that as fast as humanly possible. I know Todd has some questions that he can answer, and then Ms. Brill wants that.
And I'm just going to jump in on what it's going to cost you. All of you just recently got your estimated taxes for next year. You're going to be getting your tax bill soon. If you go to the property appraisers, as Ms. Whitfield mentioned, it's actually the taxable value, and you'll find that also on the statements you receive. Like Ms. Whitfield, my assessed value on my house is $247. I had portability, so my taxable value is $147. So what it comes out to be is $100 per 100,000 taxable value. So when you calculate it out, it's an increase of $75 per 100,000, which will make our schools safer. And you know, if our schools are safer, our communities are safer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my last final parting comment. There's 20 million people in the state of Florida. I'm only going to get a chance to speak to about 250,000 of them on these particular issues. So you are now my experts on this issue. I need your help to get out, talk to your friends, your neighbors, your communities. Please give them this information. If they need more information at pdcgov.org, the county webpage. We have a video that's on there that I've done a presentation before, as well as this PowerPoint presentation that will be up so they can receive any of that information. So thank you for having me here and being informed voters. If you want us to take questions, we're happy to do that, Dr. Middleworth.
Yes, we do have a couple of, we have cards, so if people have a card and they filled it out, we're going to come around and ask. Do you have a little time, Todd, because you have another meeting to get to?
Let's rock and roll.
Okay, there's a lot of questions here. Who appoints judges that are forced to retire?
Well, judges are both elected and appointed. So the governor appoints judges and you elect judges as well, as you see on your ballot that you have. So all of the judges would qualify in terms of the mandatory retirement age, no matter what, whether they're elected or appointed.
With constitutional change, doesn't the state legislature have the ability to determine curriculum, not the faculty, as well as to determine funding, which is, if not enough funds, eliminate programs?
Well, I think that might be related to school board, but just so you know, the Florida legislature is really who dictates almost to the school board what their millage rate is going to be. And they also cap sort of how they can raise funds locally as well. So the provision that you see is one of the few ways that the school board can come back to you and ask for additional revenues. And in this case, the plea from the school board is please help us so that we can continue with some additional programs and also with some of the salary needs and security needs that we have.
How can number 7?
Do you want to add something to
Just a tiny bit. I just want you to know that over the last few years, your property values have gone up a lot. And so, no, your property values haven't gone up? We're waving no. So property values in the county as an average have gone up. And when the property values go up, the cities and the counties get to really benefit from that. Even though there was a huge dip of many years ago, we're kind of seeing the values get back up to the pre-recession levels right now. But with the state decides how much money we get, and so they actually do reduce the amount of money that, in keeping it the same, reducing the millage, and we've been keeping our levels at basically the same rate for the last many years. And so we haven't really seen that increase, which has been a shame.
Erica, that was Amendment 7. It had nothing to do with Palm Beach County.
So you're talking about first responder benefits in Amendment 7?
No.
Are you talking about the colleges and university portion of Amendment 7?
The Constitution says that they control it, then the state legislators have complete control over the faculty members.
I'm not sure I understand the question related to 7 on that, so sorry.
Can you maybe see them after to ask that question, okay? Because it's a little nebulous right now. How can the state of Florida justify putting Amendment 6 together?
Well, the state of Florida provides for the Constitution, a Constitution Revision Commission, who has the ability to put items directly on the ballot. They're not subject to the single subject rule that voters who put petition initiatives on the ballot are. So the legislature and the Criminal Justice Commission can put multiple issues in a single question on the ballot, unlike a citizen petition. And that's, that's just the laws and the way that it is.
If we disagree with part of it, then we have to vote no. Is that correct? It may be correct but unfair.
Yeah, so you're going to have a tough choice to make. And this is the choice that the legislature oftentimes makes when they bundle issues and bills. And a lot of times you see a legislator getting blamed for something that you say, oh, how could they have possibly voted for something like that? Well, it might have been one provision of many that was in a big bill that did a lot of good things. And unfortunately, you're going to get a chance to feel how it is to be a legislator by voting on some of these amendments. And you're going to have to do the best you can to either vote for, against, or skip the question altogether if you don't want to vote on it.
This is a question just asking for clarification on number 5.
Clarification on amendment number 5?
Yes.
So amendment number 5 deals with creating a supermajority vote in order to impose, authorize, or impose state fees or taxes. It just changes the current status quo, which is a majority of the legislature can vote to increase a fee or tax with a bill that has a lot of issues in it, to a supermajority, 2/3 vote of the legislature would have to vote the affirmative in a standalone bill, so that fee or tax would have to be a single subject issue brought before them, and would have to gain a supermajority vote if this is passed.
And just one last one I have here. The number 1, reductions of services, if you vote no, what would happen?
So if you vote no on number 1, there's going to be some tough choices that our elected officials are going to have to make. They're going to have to decide whether they want to decrease services. An example of them, I mean, we know if that passes, in Palm Beach County government, you'll see an $8 million loss to fire rescue. The MSTU that pays for fire rescue will be reduced by $8 million. We'll see a $2 million reduction in libraries because the municipal service taxing unit that you pay into to fund the county library system would be reduced by $2 million. So that I can tell you definitively that somewhere within those budgets, those reductions will have to happen, or else increase taxes to make up the loss in the revenue. Likewise, in the general fund, there's a couple of other examples we put out there of what may or may not happen, but those are going to be the tough decisions that our local officials are going to have to make.
That was my question, and a lot of people are not aware of that. All they see is the increase in their homestead, so that may be, say, $50 or whatever, right. All right? But they don't see that the reduction of the services, which as seniors, that is detrimental. Is there a lot of public advertising, for lack of a better word, on this as we have here?
No, there's not a lot of public advertising on it.
Because all they see is the bottom line that they're going to be getting, not what they will be losing.
There's not. I mean, those are put out by the county as just some information. We're not advocating for it one way or the other. Just sharing with you what it might mean if it does happen.
So the League of Women Voters don't have this?
League of Women Voters has information on it in theirs.
Okay.
But there's not a statewide campaign right now advocating for or against this issue.
The League of Women Voters have these little newspapers here. They've got every amendment in it, and they also say what they are against and what they're for. They also mention other organizations that are for or against it, and you can look at it. But we have Todd here from the county, and he's giving you the straight information on everything, with trying not to be biased, but really give you the honest opinion, the honest information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You did a fantastic job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's great to be here again.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Whitfield and Commissioner Brill. Thank you very much. Thank both of you. Yes. Well, thank you. Just one thing about next month. Widening of Atlantic Avenue. We're going to be discussing that. We're going to have Nick Uren of the Transportation Planning Agency here, along with, I did get our county engineer, David Ricks. Both of them will be here to answer questions, and that will be a really good informational meeting for all of you here. We all live off or on Atlantic Avenue, right? In the corridor. We'll have a terrific month, and all the news that's fit to print is going to be in our newsletter, too.